If you've been following my tutorials, you'll know how easy it is to create your own custom workflows. Now, we've been using n8n, but there's other tools available. We've built workflows that, one, verify research claims in marketing copy, and two, we've got another workflow that generates JavaScript for experiments, and there's plenty more to come on that. Now, these workflows are centralized. They're easy to manage and maintain, and most importantly, they're totally ours to own. That means that we're not locked in to any sort of third-party vendor to use those workflows. Let's talk about access, because how can we use those workflows easily and reliably in our day-to-day work? I mean, we could set up forms and other inputs for each workflow, and that's exactly what we've done for some of these workflows. And these solutions, these sort of triggers, work fine and they're genuinely useful, but they do sort of create a rollout challenge. Like, everybody has to use that prescribed method to trigger each workflow. So that's not great. What if instead we could enable our AI chat interfaces to trigger those workflows directly? So whatever chat interface we happen to be talking to, then whenever we or anybody else in our organization asks their LLM, their AI, to do something such as create me an experiment, it would automatically use our optimized workflows instead of relying on the chat interface's own sort of black box methods. What this does is it effectively levels up our AI chat clients without tying us to a specific platform. Today, we're going to look at one way to make that happen. This is by creating our own MCP server. That means Model Context Protocol. I've already explained Model Context Protocol in a previous article, so won't go into it in much detail here. All I'll say about it is that an MCP server acts as a sort of a translation layer between our n8n workflows and then whatever tool wants to access those workflows. In this instance, it's our AI chat interfaces. All of this may sound technical, but it's actually quite straightforward, and you don't need to be a developer. As long as you follow the steps in this guide, you should have everything set up and running in no time. So yeah, let's get started. We've got this simple workflow example. What this consists of is an edit fields and a basic LLM chain. All this does is it's got some text, and I've set some text. This is going to get dated very quickly, I know. And then it sends that text to the basic LLM chain, and it just says translate this into Spanish, and then it just translates that into Spanish. Now let's create an MCP server to access this. And while we can create this MCP server in the same space, I'm going to set it up as a new workflow just because it's easier that way. So I've given it a name, simple MCP example, and then on there, search for MCP server trigger. And here we'll see that it gives us straight away the URL to access this MCP server. Go back to the workspace and we want to add a tool. So these are the tools that the MCP server will have access to. And the tool we're looking for is the one that comes up straight away under recommended tools. And that's the call n8n workflow tool. So select that, and then in that list, we'll see a list of workflows, and all of these are the workflows that we've got on our n8n. So let's do a search, simple workflow example. And when we do that, we'll see that we have a problem here. The subflow is set up to receive all input data. What it basically means is that it is wanting to connect to this workflow, but it doesn't have any way of connecting to it because this workflow wants text as a way for the workflow to work. So without text, this basic LLM chain can't do anything. So somehow this needs to send over text. So we need a sort of like a handshake between these two workflows. So the thing that's missing on this simple workflow is the sub-execution subtool. So let's correct that. If we go search for execute sub workflow, that's the one we're looking for. And then within that, the trigger we're looking for is when executed by another workflow. And then once we get that node, it's going to ask us to define the field. And this is where we define the field text. So this is the field that is now going to be sent through into the basic LLM chain. So actually we don't need that anymore. So this is what it looks like. We've got to execute by another workflow. It's set to text, a type of string. And then in here, if we actually what we need to do is save this, and then back in the MCP server trigger node, save that, and then reload it. Open this up. And now for this workflow, we've got the text input ready and available to use. So this is a text that's going to be sent, but obviously we want that text to be set by the LLM, by the AI. So this is the button we click, and then this is now defined automatically by the model. The other thing that we need to do is to describe the tool and give it a name. So this is a translate to Spanish tool. And then what this does is it accepts text and translates that text to Spanish. So this is just a brief description of what the tool does. And this is what the MCP server trigger will communicate back to the client to say, these are the tools that I've got available. This tool translates text to Spanish. It accepts text to send through and get the translation and send it back. If we wanted to test this, we could just go to the subnode and execute it. And the text I'm going to try out is this. We will win the World Cup. Execute that. And then now it's using the tool to come back with a response. So this is non-determinism at its best. But anyway, that's very simply how this works. Before we can use this MCP server trigger, just make sure that we make it active. So this workflow is active. This is the production URL we're going to be using. Now let's set this up in our chat client. And I'm not going to take you through all of the chat clients and how to set it up in all of the chat clients, because there's a lot of them. And also you can just have a conversation with your chat client and help it set you up with the MCP tool. Just ask for instructions how to add the MCP server to the config. What I will show you is how to set it up in LM Studio, because I think it's a fun exercise to do in LM Studio because the models are working locally. So very small models running locally on my machine. And now we're going to give them superpowers. In this case, very simple superpower of translating to Spanish. And yeah, let's see how that works. Here I am in LM Studio. I've got a small model loaded. This is running locally. Turned off Think. If I go to this integrations tab and then go to add integrations and edit mcp.json. So this is the configuration file. So now what do we add to the config? Well, here's the full text, but here's the full version of the MCP client that I would add. It's defined as MCP servers, and then these are the MCP servers that are defined. And then inside the MCP servers, we define our MCP server called n8n-Spanish translator. And then we put the URL in here. And if we wanted to set up protection for our endpoint, I'd very much recommend you do that. Then here you can set up a bearer authentication and set up authentication there. I'm not going to do that for this example, but I would very much recommend that you do that if you're going to be using this in production. So the key thing that we need to copy here is everything from this close brace to here. That's the actual specific config for that MCP tool. So copy that and then back to the config in LM Studio. And we've got a previous tool that we've got set up here, calculator. Find the closing braces of this, comma, and then paste our new MCP tool. So it's going to give you some strict warnings about the format. So you can just fix the formatting. Just make sure you got all of these things cut out. So I've got this fixed. And then save. And now go back, create a new chat, and then go to integrations, and we've got our tool available to use. So tick that, MCP Spanish translator. We've got a tool there. And then let's say translate the following text to Spanish using the tool provided. And the text that we want to translate is, let's start simple, hello. And trigger that. And what's going to happen is that it is going to call the Spanish translator, the n8n instance. It's going to send text hello, and then this is the result that we get back. Translated text is hola. So perfect. This is all working. Now, obviously, this is a very simple example, but the same process applies to more involved workflows that I shared with you earlier. For instance, for my code developing workflow, I set up this subtrigger, which takes in the URL and the change request. I replaced the subtool for the MCP server, calling the self-healing A/B test creator, giving a description, URL, change request. And then in my LM Studio config, I changed the name to A/B test JavaScript creator. I didn't need the Spanish translator thing. The URL is the same. Now, you may need to add a timeout if your workflow takes a while to process, which mine does. And then when I prompt LM Studio using that tool, it will then use that tool to give me the JavaScript code. Now, ideally, you wouldn't need to have this timeout. And ideally, what would happen is when you prompt this, it would push everything into the testing tool and all of this kind of stuff. And then it would just return you with a success message rather than you having to copy the code and put them into places. But you get the gist of this. My LM Studio local model now has coding superpowers. The best thing about this is there's not a single large model in use within that entire workflow. And yet the output is much better than those like super powerful, supposedly frontier models. And that's just one single workflow. The real power comes when you scale this up, when you create more workflows, and when you connect these new specific workflows to your chat interfaces as tools. And now you've got these optimized workflows that are generating reliable and consistent output, all from within your chat interfaces. And that's the real superpower here. And that's how you scale up. So Then the question is for you, what are you going to use MCP servers for in your own setups, whether it's n8n or anything else? Let me know what workflows you create, and yeah, see you next time.